the sweat from his brow. At 42 years old, his hands told the story of 2 decades in manual labor. Calloused, scarred, but steady. Around his waist hung a leather tool belt his father had given him before deployment to Iraq, worn but reliable. And clipped to his side, drawing mockery from every new crew member, was his military-issued sapper shovel. "It's just a shovel, man," one of the younger guys had said that morning, snickering. "Why don't you get real tools like the rest of us?" Marcus never bothered explaining. The trifold entrenching tool had saved his life more than once in Fallujah. It wasn't about digging anymore. It was about trust. The Riverside Plaza project was supposed to be straightforward. Renovate the old bank building into luxury condos for the new wave of tech money flooding Tulsa. Marcus's company, Hartwell Construction, had won the bid, but barely. The profit margins were tight, and the boss, Jim Hartwell, made sure everyone knew it. "Every penny counts, boys," Jim barked during the morning briefing, his belly hanging over his belt buckle. "No overtime unless I approve it. No wasted materials. And Marcus," he pointed with a stubby finger, "stop bringing that damn army shovel to work. This ain't Baghdad. Makes us look unprofessional." A few guys chuckled. Marcus said nothing, just nodded and walked toward his assignment for the day, the basement level where they were breaking through to create underground parking access. The basement was a different world. Dark, musty, untouched since the 1970s when the bank had sealed off the lower vault area after a failed robbery attempt. The concrete walls were thick, reinforced, built in an era when people still believed in impenetrable security. Marcus's job was to help the demolition team break through the old vault corridor so they could expand the foundation. By midday, the jackhammers were screaming, and dust filled the air like fog. Marcus worked alongside Tommy Reeves, a hothead 20-something who'd been on the crew for 6 months and thought he knew everything. "Man, this wall is ridiculous," Tommy shouted over the noise. "What did they build this thing for, nuclear war?" "Close enough," Marcus replied, running his hand over the pitted concrete. "Cold War paranoia. Banks used to build vaults like bunkers." Tommy laughed. "Well, good thing we got these bad boys." He patted his pneumatic drill like it was a prize horse. "Your little shovel wouldn't do jack against this." Marcus smiled faintly. "Probably right." They worked in rotation, 15 minutes on the hammer, 15 minutes rest. The wall was giving way slowly, reluctantly, like it resented being disturbed after all these years. By 3 in the afternoon, they'd created a gap large enough to peer through. Tommy shone his flashlight into the darkness beyond. "Holy crap, there's a whole room back here. Marcus, check this out." Marcus leaned in. The beam revealed a small chamber, maybe 12 by 12 feet, with metal filing cabinets lining one wall and what looked like a reinforced door on the opposite side. Strange. The blueprints hadn't shown any additional rooms beyond the main vault. "Jim's gonna want to see this," Tommy said, already pulling out his phone. "Might be asbestos or something. We could get shut down." Before he could dial, a deep rumble shook the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. Both men froze. "What the hell was that?" Tommy whispered. The rumble came again, longer this time, and then a sound like distant thunder. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. Emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in sickly red. "We need to get out," Marcus said calmly, but firmly. Now, they turned toward the stairs, but the third rumble was different, sharper, more violent. The sound of stressed metal screaming. And then, with a boom that punched the air from their lungs, the ceiling near the stairwell collapsed. Concrete, rebar, and decades of accumulated debris crashed down, blocking their only exit. The dust was so thick Marcus couldn't see his own hands. He pulled his shirt over his mouth and nose, grabbing Tommy's shoulder. "Stay calm. Don't move yet. Let the dust settle." Tommy was breathing fast, panicked. "We're trapped. Oh God, we're trapped down here." "We're not trapped," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "We just need to think." As the dust began to clear, the reality became apparent. The collapse had sealed the stairwell entirely. The emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the rubble pile, Tons of concrete and twisted metal between them and freedom. Marcus could hear voices above, muffled and distant. The rest of the crew knew they were down here. Help would come. But how long would it take? And then another sound cut through his thoughts. A hissing noise, faint but growing louder. Tommy heard it too. What's that? Marcus's blood ran cold. Gas line. The collapse must have ruptured a gas line. The hissing grew louder, and with it came the unmistakable smell of natural gas. Sweet, sickly, dangerous. Marcus's military training kicked in immediately. He grabbed Tommy's arm and pulled him toward the far corner of the basement, away from the collapsed stairwell. How bad is it? Tommy's voice cracked with fear. Bad enough. We need to get out of here before the concentration builds up. One spark and this whole place becomes a tomb. Above them, the muffled voices grew more urgent. Marcus could hear Jim Hartwell shouting orders, the sound of equipment being moved. They knew about the collapse. But did they know about the gas? Marcus pulled out his phone, no signal, not through all that concrete. Tommy tried his same result. They don't know about the gas, Tommy said, panic rising. They're gonna use power tools up there. Cutting torches. They'll blow us all to hell. Marcus forced himself to think clearly. The gas was leaking somewhere in the collapsed section, probably from a damaged line in the wall. The basement was large enough that they had time before the concentration became critical, but not much. And if the rescue crew above started cutting through the rubble with anything that produced sparks, we need another way out, Marcus said, scanning the basement with the dim red emergency lighting. There is no other way out. Tommy shouted. The only exit is buried under 10 tons of concrete. Marcus's eyes fell on the gap they'd made in the old vault wall, the small chamber beyond, and that reinforced door on the far side. Maybe there is, he said quietly. He moved quickly to the opening, squeezing through the gap they'd hammered out earlier. Tommy followed, coughing from the dust that still hung in the air. Marcus's flashlight beam swept across the forgotten room. Filing cabinets covered in decades of grime, a metal desk pushed against one wall, and there, the heavy steel door they'd glimpsed before. This might lead to an old service tunnel, Marcus said, approaching the door. Banks sometimes had emergency exits from vault areas. Cold War stuff. The door was massive, easily 4 inches of solid steel with a wheel lock mechanism that looked like something from a submarine. Rust had seized most of it. Marcus grabbed the wheel and pulled. Nothing. He tried again, throwing his full weight into it. The wheel didn't budge even a millimeter. It's rusted shut, Tommy said, his voice hollow. We're screwed. Above them, a new sound, the whine of a power saw starting up. The rescue crew was beginning their work. Stop! Marcus screamed at the ceiling, knowing they couldn't hear him. Stop cutting. But the sound continued. They had minutes, maybe less. Tommy slumped against the wall, his face pale in the flashlight beam. This is it. This is how we die. Trapped in a basement in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My mom doesn't even know where I am today. Marcus stared at the door, his mind racing. Then his hand dropped to his tool belt, to the worn leather pouch where his sapper shovel rested. The tool every construction worker had mocked. The tool Jim Hartwell had told him not to bring. He pulled it out, unfolded it with practiced precision, and looked at the edge, sharpened countless times over 20 years, honed to a razor's edge that had cut through more than just dirt in a rock. Marcus ran his thumb along the sapper shovel's edge, feeling the sharpness that had been meticulously maintained through 2 decades. Tommy watched him with hollow eyes, not understanding. What are you doing? That's a shovel, Marcus. We need a miracle, not a gardening tool. Marcus didn't respond. He approached the door, examining the frame where steel met concrete. The door itself was impenetrable, but the frame had been set in the 1970s with materials that weren't meant to last forever. He could see it now, hairline cracks in the concrete surrounding the bolts, rust bleeding through where moisture had seeped in over 50 years. The whine of the power saw above grew louder. Marcus could smell the gas getting stronger. He positioned the shovel's edge against the concrete near the top hinge, angled it precisely, and brought his boot down on the back of the blade with all his weight. Once, twice, 3 times. The concrete began to chip away. "You're insane," Tommy whispered. "That's never going to work." Marcus didn't waste breath arguing. He'd learned in Fallujah that a sapper shovel wasn't just for digging. It was a pry bar, a weapon, a climbing tool, an axe. In the right hands, with the right technique, it could breach mud walls, cut through chain-link fencing, even chip away at concrete barriers when explosives weren't an option. He worked systematically, striking the same spot repeatedly, each impact sending tiny fragments of aged concrete scattering. The sound echoed in the small chamber, metal on stone, rhythmic, purposeful. Above them, the power saw screamed louder. Sweat poured down Marcus's face. His shoulders burned with each strike, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The concrete around the top hinge began to crumble more significantly. 50 years of moisture damage and neglect had weakened it more than its builders ever imagined. "It's working," Tommy said suddenly, moving closer. "Holy crap, it's actually working." Marcus shifted to the bottom hinge, repeating the process. Strike, chip, strike, chip. The sapper shovel's edge, sharpened on countless deployment nights when sleep wouldn't come, bit into the concrete like it was meant for exactly this moment. "If you're watching this and thinking there's no way out of your situation," Marcus grunted between strikes, "sometimes the tool everyone laughs at is the one that saves your life. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this ends, because I promise you, it's not over yet." 10 minutes of relentless striking. The gas smell was making Marcus dizzy now, but the concrete around both hinges had crumbled significantly. He wedged the shovel blade into the gap he'd created at the top hinge and threw his weight against the handle, using it as a lever. Metal groaned. The ancient bolts, their concrete housing destroyed, began to give way. "Help me," Marcus said to Tommy. "When I count to 3, we both push." Tommy grabbed the door near the bottom hinge. Both men positioned themselves. 1, 2, 3. They pushed with everything they had. The door resisted. Then suddenly, with a shriek of tortured metal, the top hinge tore free from the compromised concrete. The door lurched forward, hanging at an angle with only the bottom hinge holding it. Marcus didn't hesitate. He repositioned the shovel at the remaining hinge, striking with renewed urgency. The gas concentration was critical now. He could taste it in the back of his throat, metallic and wrong. Above them, the power saw suddenly stopped. For one blessed moment, Marcus thought they'd realized the danger. Then he heard a new sound, the distinct click and whoosh of a cutting torch igniting. "No time," he gasped, slamming the shovel against the concrete with desperate force. The bottom hinge's concrete housing shattered. "Tommy, push!" They threw themselves against the door. With a final metallic scream, it tore free and crashed inward, revealing a dark corridor beyond. Stale air rushed out, 50 years of it, but it was breathable. Marcus grabbed Tommy and shoved him through. "Go, go." They stumbled into the corridor just as a spark from the cutting torch above found the gas. The explosion wasn't massive, the concentration hadn't built up enough for that. But it was enough. A ball of orange flame whooshed through the basement behind them, singeing Marcus's back as he dove deeper into the corridor. The concussive force slammed them both against the tunnel walls. For several seconds, Marcus couldn't hear anything but ringing. His back burned where the flames had touched him. But they were alive. They were breathing. Tommy was crying, gasping. "We made it. Oh God, we made it." "Not yet," Marcus said, pushing himself up. "We need to find where this leads." The corridor stretched ahead, lit only by their flashlights. It was narrow, concrete walls pressing in from both sides, with pipes running along the ceiling. Marcus recognized it immediately. A service tunnel, exactly what he'd hoped for. These old buildings had networks of them, connecting basements to utility stations, sometimes to other buildings entirely. They moved forward, Marcus leading. His back throbbed, but the pain kept him focused. Behind them, he could hear chaos. Shouting, alarms, the sound of fire extinguishers. The crew above would think they were dead. After 200 feet, the corridor opened into a junction. 3 directions. Marcus shone his light down each path, looking for any indication of an exit. The left path showed a dead end. The right curved away into darkness. Straight ahead, he saw something, A ladder. Leading up. There, he said. They climbed. 20 rungs up. Marcus's hands found a metal hatch. He pushed. It didn't budge. Locked from above. But the locking mechanism was old, simple. He wedged the sapper shovel into the gap and levered it. The lock snapped. The hatch opened onto an alley behind a strip mall, 3 blocks from the construction site. Late afternoon sunlight poured down, blinding after the darkness. Marcus and Tommy crawled out, collapsing onto the pavement. Around them, Tulsa went about its business. Cars passing, people walking, completely unaware that 2 men had just clawed their way back from the edge of death. Tommy looked at Marcus, then at the sapper shovel still clutched in his hand. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for making fun of it, for not understanding." Marcus sat on the curb, his burned back pressed against the cool brick wall of the strip mall. In the distance, sirens wailed. Fire trucks, ambulances, all rushing toward the construction site. He pulled out his phone. Still no signal underground, but here it worked fine. He dialed Jim Hartwell's number. Jim answered on the first ring, his voice frantic. "Marcus? Marcus, is that you? Oh, thank God. Where are you? We thought the explosion." "We're alive," Marcus said simply. 3 blocks east. Behind the Walgreens on 5th Street. The words seemed to drain all strength from Jim's voice. "You're alive? Both of you?" "Both of us." Within minutes, emergency vehicles surrounded them. Paramedics checked them over. Tommy for shock and smoke inhalation, Marcus for the burns on his back. "Second degree," the paramedic said, "but you'll be fine." "You're lucky." "Lucky," Marcus repeated, thinking about that word. Maybe, or maybe prepared. Jim arrived in his truck, nearly in tears. He grabbed Marcus by the shoulders, carefully avoiding his injured back. How did you get out?" "The stairs were completely blocked. We were cutting through when the gas ignited. We thought." Marcus held up the sapper shovel, now covered in concrete dust, its edge dulled but intact. "This?" Jim stared at the tool he'd mocked that very morning. The tool he'd told Marcus not to bring. His face went through several emotions. Confusion, disbelief, understanding, shame. "I don't understand," he finally said. So Marcus explained. The old vault door, the rusted hinges, the compromised concrete, how the shovel's edge, sharpened and maintained over 20 years, had chipped away enough material to free them. How the tool designed for military combat engineering had become their salvation in a basement in Oklahoma. Other crew members gathered around, listening. These were the same men who'd laughed that morning, the same ones who'd questioned why Marcus carried a relic from another life. Tommy stood up from where the paramedics were treating him. He walked over to the group, still shaky but determined. "Listen up," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in that dark corridor. "Every single one of us owes our lives to Marcus. Not just me, all of us. That gas explosion would have been 10 times worse if we'd been in that basement when it blew. And the only reason we weren't is because this man," his voice cracked slightly, "had the right tool and knew how to use it." He turned to Marcus. "I'll never mock anyone's experience again. Never assume I know better just because something looks old or different." Jim cleared his throat. "Marcus, I apologize. For this morning. For every time I questioned your methods. You saved Tommy's life. You probably saved the whole crew from a disaster." Marcus nodded, accepting the apology without needing to hear more. He looked at the sapper shovel, turning it over in his hands. "My father gave me this before his last deployment. He said, 'Tools don't make the man. The man makes the tool worth carrying.'" For the first time since morning, Marcus allowed himself to smile. Today, Dad's words proved true. 18 months later, Marcus stood in front of a classroom at Tulsa Community College, guest lecturing for their construction management program. The burn scars on his back had faded to thin white lines, barely noticeable. But the story they represented had become something much larger than him. The incident at Riverside Plaza had made national news. Not just the explosion and miraculous escape, but the investigation that followed revealed systemic safety violations across multiple construction sites in Oklahoma. The coverage sparked conversations about experience versus efficiency, about respecting traditional knowledge, about the dangerous cost-cutting that had become standard practice. Jim Hartwell's company had been fined heavily, but Jim himself had transformed. He'd implemented comprehensive safety protocols, hired a full-time safety officer, and most importantly, started listening to his experienced workers. The company's reputation had actually grown stronger. Clients respected a contractor who learned from mistakes. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Tommy, who now managed his own small contracting business. "Lunch next week? Want your opinion on a tricky foundation issue." Marcus smiled. Tommy had become one of his closest friends, a partnership forged in darkness and desperation. The young man who'd mocked experience had become its fierce advocate. The students in front of Marcus were mostly in their early 20s, eager and confident in their textbook knowledge. He recognized that energy. He'd had it once too. "So, a student raised her hand. Is the lesson that we should all carry military shovels?" The class laughed. Marcus shook his head. "The lesson is that every tool has value if you understand its purpose. That shovel saved our lives not because it was magic, but because I'd spent 20 years learning what it could do. Experience isn't about being old-fashioned. It's about being prepared for the moment when everything goes wrong." He held up the sapper shovel, now mounted on a wooden plaque that Jim had given him. A gift and an apology combined. The edge had been resharpened one final time, then sealed behind glass. This represents something more than survival. It represents the wisdom of being underestimated and proving yourself anyway. It represents the value of carrying what others mock until the moment it saves everyone's life. The class was silent now, actually listening. "Whatever field you enter," Marcus continued, "respect the people who came before you. Learn from those who've been tested. And never, ever assume that just because something looks outdated, it doesn't have purpose." After class, several students stayed to ask questions, to hear more stories, to understand. Marcus answered each one patiently, remembering when he'd been the young soldier learning from veterans who'd survived situations he couldn't imagine. That evening, sitting on his porch with a cold beer, Marcus received a call from a documentary producer. They wanted to tell his story, to explore how traditional skills still mattered in a modern world. He agreed on one condition, that Tommy be interviewed too. As the sun set over Tulsa, painting the sky orange and gold, Marcus thought about his father, about the shovel, about the men who'd laughed and then learned. Some tools you carry for a lifetime, waiting for the moment they're needed. And when that moment comes, you'll be grateful you never listened to those who said to put them down. Thank you so much for staying until the end of the story. If it moved you, hit that like button and drop a comment below telling me what tool or skill from your past ended up saving you when you least expected it. Subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories of survival, redemption, and the power of experience. What story should I tell next? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, remember, never underestimate what experience and the right tool can do when everything's on the line.